Hello again, I'm Stephen Cummings, and this is another edition of the Citizens Community Forum. Our objective is always to have an engaging and interactive and civil discourse, and in so doing, develop a culture of peace and understanding through constructive dialogue and, yes, citizens' participation. Our guests are persons who express views, opinions, and perspectives of their own, and sometimes may not necessarily be that of the FBN network, the Citizens Community Forum, or that of the host. Our topics are also wide-ranging. Discussion at times may be emotionally charged, but surely we can always find common ground and learn from each other, irrespective of our differing views. Now, on the program at this time, we put the spotlight on the fishing and farming sectors in Trinidad and Tobago. And there are several questions we want to look at this time on the program. Have the sectors been faring well over the last few years? What are some of the impediments to further growth and development of these two sectors? State of employment, how have these sectors been impacting on employment statistics? And are there in place the right policies, incentives to ensure sustainability? Another question is how vulnerable might these sectors be in the face of the impact of the global pandemic and the now Russia-Ukraine crisis? How has imports and foreign exchange impacted the sectors? There's so many questions we want to address at this time on the program, and we have two very, very important guests, persons who are no stranger to Trinidad and Tobago. And let me welcome at this time to the Citizens Community Forum, Mr. Gary Aboud from the Fishermen and Friends of the Sea. Gary, good evening to you, and welcome to the Citizens Community Forum.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you.
And once again, I'm no stranger to the program, Mr. Shiraz Khan. Shiraz, hello again and welcome.
Hello, thanks. Pleasant evening to you, your viewers and your listeners. Thank you for having me. You just continue to do what we have to do in the best interest of our citizens and so on.
Yes, indeed, and it's always a pleasure to have you on, Shiraz. Gary, I know that this is your first time, so we have to give you a special welcome. And as per usual, we always like to start out with our new guests first in terms of starting out the discussion. I saw a statement, Gary, which says that Trinidad and Tobago is a reputable source for excellent fishery products, of which an estimated US $40 million is exported to the US annually. What do you see currently, Gary, as the present state of the fishing industry in Trinidad and Tobago? Give us your sense, your perspective as to where you sit. We have been hearing so much from the politicians and the policymakers. The view at this time is to get a community perspective, and I know that you have been one of those persons who continue to be on the ground.
Well, Stephen, you're asking me hard questions.
I'm sure you can manage, Gary.
the majority of the 40 million is the shrimp. The shrimp exports amount to quite a lot, but there are two sides to one coin, because the shrimp is the feedstock of all of the other migratory species. So when you take out the shrimp, you have a collapse of all of the other species, but no one wants to face that. We want the pleasure now, and we will face the consequences later. The other thing is that there are published studies that have been published, peer-reviewed publications by professors and people with doctorates in the field, warning about the contamination of the fishery and the contamination of the food chain. And so it's great that we are exporting, and we are totally in support of the monetization of the fishery, but there are always different sides to the same coin. And although that number looks like a brilliant number, every year we are at risk and have a statistical record of murder on the sea, that we suffer the consequences of, well, the same consequences everybody at every sector suffers anytime there's any public administration responsible for overseeing the well-being of the public interest. So So murder at sea and larceny and robbery and all of the things come with the insecurities of being on the sea, the fact that we have no, well, actually, Shiraz, I don't know what the legislation is like governing the land-based farming,
Well,
but
we'll get to Shiraz in a while, but we
but
just wanted you
but,
to explain, to
but
expand
in
on
the
that point, Gary.
in the fishery, we we famous for breaking world records. We are great sprinters, but in the fishery, we have the oldest legislation on planet Earth, and I think we should have an antique celebration of the backwardness of our public administrators, because here we are paying tens of millions of dollars to furnish a parliament who have not found it noteworthy that a sector that the fisheries division says employs over 50,000 souls, that there should not be any legislation that is relevant or current. So we have no radars to protect us from crime or murder at sea, or robbery or smuggling, or the movement of human and other cargo from the Venezuelan mafia in and out of Trinidad. No radars, but big warships that we spend tens of millions of dollars to buy, and even more to keep them parked up and not dysfunctional. We're spending $6 billion in national security, but our fishermen have to run for their lives when bandits come upon them, and they do. So, it's nice to say that we export 40 million US dollars, but wouldn't it have been better with a well-managed fishery where we could have, and more, very, very possibly could have exported $1 billion US a year, and a number that would be escalating, rather than the current position where even the shrimp trawlers want to be bought out. Even the government themselves have gone through the whole process to buy out the shrimp trawlers, because they're a collapsing sector and a non-productive or an unsustainable sector that deprives the artisanal fishers of the migratory species which so abundantly come here to spawn and to feed on the shrimp and the larvae of the shrimp. So
All right.
it's not a pretty picture for us. It's an opportunity lost. And when you add into the mix that every industrial producer discharges their waste into the sea. The whole Point Esos industrial estate was built upon the idea that you just pump it a mile into the Gulf of Paria. We have studies to show on the East Coast mercury contamination higher than the World Health Organization permits in several of the commercially harvested species. We have studies on the Gulf of Paria showing a critical and dangerous level. We don't.
Okay.
Sure, you never hear me talking about this, because when people hear it, they stop buying fish.
Well, Gary, I know that you're a long time campaigner, against pollutants and so. I mean,
Yeah.
you've been campaigning for this against this for quite some
But
time.
but,
But allow
if
me.
we were,
Yeah.
if we were a unified nation without all of the 27 dissections that Lloyd Best spoke about our society, where we look at each other for all of the differences that we have in our skin color, or eyes, or religion, or ethnic background, and if we could just come together and get all 55,000 fishers to go to the Red House and stop the Red House from doing what it does and ensure that it does what it should do, but have a different country for our farmers, for our
All right.
food security.
Well, certainly that's a perspective. But Gary, I'll come back to you in a short bit. Let me just bring in Shiraz here. Shiraz, we've been talking quite a lot about agriculture. Every year we've been broaching the same topic, and it is a discussion and a conversation that we need to continue to have. What in your mind remain some of the fundamentals for taking the farming industry seriously? Now, Shiraz, I've heard it said, you have said it quite often, that that this sector appears to be what I would put in my own words, a discarded child of the economy. I think you would put it differently. Where are we now? In 2022, we're talking about 2022. I mean, I've been I've been getting a sense as to prices and what seems to be a trend in the local industry as we speak. What are you sensing now, Shiraz?
Okay, thanks, my brother. I think you are very moderate in the description. I will continue to say the bastard child of the economy. Right?
I know you were
I
getting to
think
that, yes.
I think we continue to treat agriculture as the bastard child of the economy, because one of the things that I keep saying, and I will continue to say, at the end of the day, the politicians, the people in prison, the workers, the people in the media, everyone had to eat when the day comes. Some eat 2 square meals, some eat 3 square meals, some eat 4 square meals and beyond. What happened at this time is that our cries in the wilderness is coming to form now, that what we are saying in the past has actually, the manure has hit the fan. I can't use the other word, right? So I will use the manure, because what have happened is that we are facing some problems, and you see within the last 2 months or between 6 to 8 weeks ago, we saw prices rising beyond our understanding.
Yes.
And some beyond some people's expectation. And what causing that is because of the lack of effort behind putting agriculture as a mainstay in the economy. Now, if you could recall, in the very beginning, on the very first shutdown of the country because of the COVID, after the protective services, agriculture, farmers was mentioned, that the farmers would be exempted from some of the restrictions and so on. But from then to now, every other sector got incentives to carry on, but the farmers have not received anything whatsoever. And if I am not sure of what I'm saying, somebody could correct me, because what have happened is from then to now, prices in almost everything in agriculture has escalated. From seeds to fertilizers to spray cans to machinery to medicine and so on for animals and so on. But people still expect the price of food to remain the same.
And you have said, I've heard you said also, Shiraz, that the farmers are not the ones to be blamed.
Right, but you still want the prices to be cheap, with all of the problems that the farmers are facing. Now we have a global situation where we have more rain in some times and sun at some times. The weather is so unpredictable. We didn't have a good dry season this year. If you could recall, we didn't have many fires, which is a good thing. But then it has some farmers that live in areas that are prone to flooding, could not have planted during this dry season in some areas. One area that suffered and even a bad name in my mouth is Shagaramas, the Wolfwood farmers. They are heavily farmed during the dry season because the area is a water table, a very low water table.
Yes.
Right, Tabakit and some of those places. So what happened is that for the last 2 years, some of these farmers could not have planted because of the continuous rain in the dry season.
All right.
So some of them had to claim flooding in that time, but they say, well, if you know it was going to flood, why you plant? But you are accustomed planting in the dry season.
Okay. All right.
You didn't expect a flood in the dry season. So what happened is that we as farmers and the consumers too, because you are seeing things going up every day, all your food stuff going up. But they want the vegetable farmers and the root crop farmers and the meat farmers and so on for our price to remain the same, which is very, very unfair and very difficult to do.
All right, Shiraz, I'll come back to you again. Let me just bring Gary back in. Gary, I'm sensing that even as Shiraz was talking about the different climatic conditions, rain, flooding, what have you. How much in your view do you see climate change been impacting on the fisheries industry, the fisheries sector? I've seen reports of depleting stocks, global depleting stocks, and overfishing. And so many other ills. You mentioned pollution, but that's quite apart from that. How much when we talk about climate change, how much do you believe that has been impacting on the fisheries?
It's not a matter of what I believe. This is a scientific question that the jury is out on. There isn't many scientific publications, but the things that we have scientific publications on, we should be talking about. And those are the things that I came to talk about, was matters that we could speak about with scientific certainty.
Sure.
Everything, I'm sorry that Shiraz, you stopped Shiraz there, because everything that he is saying, I'm seeing parallels in the sector that we are in. For instance, the inshore fish, where it doesn't cost us very much in gas to get there, is being destroyed every day by every imaginable activity. So we have to go further to catch fish. But the price of gas, you pay the full price. And there's no mechanism to ensure that the inshore fishery is protected, or that we have any subsidy on the price of gas for the cost that it takes us to get that much further. But on the other hand, the late great Patrick Manning thought it wise to liberalize the market and to allow imported fish to service the fast food sectors. So we can get fish imported where the fisheries are better managed with better public administrators. And so the fishermen can catch tons more at a much lower cost being imported into the fast food chains, and our men get left out. The flip side of that is that locally, I must say that on both sides of the parliament, we are governed by people that share an equal level of brilliance, because we don't have any protection for a naturally reoccurring resource. Shiraz has to plant his food and ensure that the crops are properly watered, that weeds are kept off, all of the multiple types of pests that attack the crops stay off of it, so that he can harvest. But we in the fishery, we don't have those kind of problems. We just leave it and God takes care of it, and we just come and catch it and take it home. But yet we don't have any legislation to protect the spawning schools. Schools come here from Eastern Canada, and they come here to spawn, and we catch the mothers out with laden eggs before they can drop their eggs and have them fertilized so the future fishery can multiply. We catch everything at any size, even though we have legislation from 1917, 105 years old. That legislation protected fish of a certain size, because if you just leave it without having to do anything to it, it would naturally get larger, and we could harvest it at a larger size. But
that's not happening. That's not happening. And we talked
haven't
about
upgraded legislation. We haven't thought it necessary to create any kind of fishery policy to govern how fish are taken out. We don't have any protected areas. For instance, fish come from Eastern Canada to particular areas in Trinidad to spawn, and they turn up by the millions, by the tens of millions, and they have a big happy orgy, and then they go back. So our men, as we discover it, we go there, and 10, 20, 30 boats would go in there and harvest as much as they could possibly harvest. And it's all exported. There's no limit as to who can come and catch, or how much, or what size, or where, or when, or how. So
the legislation is lacking. The legislation is enforcement is lacking. That's what you're hinting at, Gary. And Gary, I would allow you to develop that point further, but we do have to take a break. And when we come back, we will continue the discussion. And we just want to remind our listeners and our viewers that this is the Citizens Community Forum. Stephen Cummings talking with Mr. Gary Aboud from the Fishermen and Friends of the Sea organization, as well as Mr. Shiraz Khan, who is representing the farming community here in Trinidad and Tobago. The topic focus on fishing and farming here in Trinidad and Tobago. Very, very important subject and topic matter at this time. So, gentlemen, we take a short break and we come right back. The University of the West Indies has the capacity to generate its own funding, or at least part funding. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Yes, Stephen, thank you very kindly. You have put it in a precise language. If they have been doing that, it is to a minuscule extent.
Somebody tried to ask me, so what do you want? I said, brother, let me do good. Sometimes, even as a person, you ain't sure what you want. but you're absolutely sure what you don't want. And workers are absolutely certain that this 2% that is on offer is an insult.
2% over an 8-year period and tell your boy about cool it now. You know, things are hard. No. Are we living in a different Trinidad and Tobago? And that is what we have to discuss.
Discussion on health, leadership, governance, crime, education, and social justice. Every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m., the Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Thank you for.
Thank you.
Yeah. Gary, before we went to the break, you were developing the point there, talking about, the legislative part of it in terms of, treating with fisheries. There was a 2016 report. I don't know if you probably would have remembered this or probably would have read it, Gary. There was a report in 2016, which I believe penned by Dr. Farinaz Solomon, a fisheries biologist, Institute of Marine Affairs, where it is said that Trinidad and Tobago was yellow carded by the European Union as a non-cooperative state in the global fight against illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. And it was also noted that Trinidad and Tobago has a large fleet operating internationally, and authorities do not control and inspect foreign vessels, nor cooperate with flag states. And the report goes on to say, Gary, that it was also, said that, if we have a red card, or a red card would not, that a red card would not only tarnish our international image, but ensuring trade sanctions and the loss of port services by foreign entities would result in economic losses. So I'm not sure if you have had sight to that report among so many others, Gary.
Yes, of course. I'm familiar with the report. And because she has tenure in the IMA, she wasn't removed. Anybody who is employed on contract, who dares to speak out and make public these types of things, would no longer, their contract would expire. Nevertheless, Farinaz is still there. So, I mean,
all right. So,
but as I say, we've broken up into 27 different categories.
Right.
I only feel blessed that I am in the same category with Shiraz.
Okay.
So there's a bridge.
All right. So that's the cue that's my cue to bring Shiraz back into the discussion. Shiraz, Gary's talking about the resources that are being apparently, in his view, that have been misdirected. I want to stay away from. I don't want to get into too much of the politics and what have you. But I'm saying that there's this view that a lot of our resources are misdirected, and especially where the finances are concerned. And again, looking at the agricultural sector, I've also had many discussions with you. Times, Shiraz, talking about the budgetary allocation for agriculture, minuscule, very, very small amount comparatively to other ministries. Is it that you are of the same view? I know Gary hinted at something sort of pulling you into the discussion, but are you of the same view, Shiraz, that maybe we should be spending more on the development of the agricultural sector and a little less on things that are celebratory?
Well, let me put it this way to you.
Yes.
For all these years of treating agriculture in the way that we have done, now that it has become critical, not critical in terms of people doing business, but critical for the country's welfare. Let me just, by the way, congratulations to Jerome Richards and his other colleagues of their good performance in the Commonwealth Games, right? I mean to say, there are a few things that are making us proud in this country, and it has never been politicians or the opposition or anything like that. It has always been our sportsmen, it has always been our cultural artists, it has always been our beautiful women, right? And sometimes our flowers, our natural flowers and fauna.
Flora and fauna, yes.
Winning out shows throughout the world. It has never been politicians. It had a time when honey made us proud in the country, when twice they entered the world competition and won. And the third time, the politicians and them see fit not to send us. So we have something to celebrate. But these things are happening against the backdrop of individuals making effort to do things to promote Trinidad and Tobago. right, is never, but the thing about it is that, take for instance, agriculture. Agriculture is given point 0.7 billion to feed this nation, right? Last year budget, we had an additional $500 million. Up to now, I didn't hear the opposition asking about it or where that $500 million went. Right? It was mentioned in budget. I am not talking by guess. It was mentioned in the budget. This year, there's $300 million stimulus apart from the $0.7 billion that is given to us. Whereas the Ministry of National Security will be getting $0.6 billion, $6 billion, 5 point something billion dollars. You check that in the last 12 years, 12 eights, 12 sevens, whatever you check is almost $100 billion that national security have, and our country is still in a condition on crime very difficult, because Gary mentioned about crime on the seas in terms of criminals.
Yes.
Do you know that this country had a PDL larceny unit that was set up to protect farmers and to treat with PDL larceny of farmers? That unit has been grounded for the last 2 months. All the vehicles are parked up in Centeno, right? Because the guys are fed up, because on a month-to-month contract, they are being treated as without the resources to perform a high-level, dangerous duty, right? They have some of them have left the job and gone over to the Special Reserve Police Unit because it has been frustrating for them. Right now, I mean, they say I am opening myself up to the thieves and things in the country. Yes, but the thing about it is that if you don't talk about what is happening, how can't we get enough resources to even satisfy a PDL larceny squad? They have vehicles since 2008 using that don't have spare tires, don't have diesel in some cases, don't have a siren on it, don't have a revolving light in it, police lights. So how could we continue with all of these negative things that happen to us, and yet we don't have money to run the Ministry of Agriculture?
Okay.
You know, the PDL larceny unit have to be functioning. Let me give you a good example of what is to happen. We are suffering right now with almost a 60% increase in the last 2 years of concentrate, which is animal feed, what we call feed. Right? Which is concentrate, a bag feed bought from one of the feed millers and so on, right? Almost a 60% increase of that. We have faced almost the thing I'm going to mention to you, and Gary will understand that. We are producing urea in Trinidad and Tobago, right? We put, you know, urea, right? Urea is a fertilizer, a local fertilizer. Our local fertilizer is selling to the farmers in this country more expensive than the imported fertilizer. We have to pay, and all this company is using all our natural resources to produce the urea, but yet our farmers have to pay the high price for it.
All right.
Right? So there are some things that is on very, very simple to deal with, but yet we are faced with difficulties of even getting a response in terms of how could we get betterment in the sector. Because if I tell you something, right now I have abandoned about 50 melon trees, tomatoes, okras, and so on. The African snail is like flies in our gardens in Castle Field. When you drive on the road, your car going packs early morning, because there's millions of African snails that is infested in the farming and community in Castlefield. We have so many problems, but if you can't talk about PDL larceny and the continued availability of resources in terms of where we can improve. Now, understand this, listeners. The problem is not that we want the farmers only to get rich. If the farmers don't produce food in this country in a little while from now, because you've seen importation is becoming more and more difficult and more expensive. So it's not like we're going to get cheaper food to come into the country. It's a global situation.
All right. So that's
global situation.
Right. So that's an indicator that we can expect higher prices, you know, at the supermarkets and
it will continue to go up, my brother, because we are not in control. We are not doing things, because I will tell you something. Give me a minute. Give me a minute.
Yeah.
If you in a household having difficulties to provide for your family, which means you're going to look at doing other things. You would not turn to crime because you are not that type of person. You would like to probably do a job or two for the week and see if you could get additional money to feed your family. Don't you think that the farmer who have to go through all of this to feed you also have to face the supermarket, the gas station, the insurance, and all of these other things? The farmer is not like you that you could apply for sick leave or casual leave or vacation. We don't have that. And we cannot close because livestock farmers are different person. He works every god day that is less.
All right, Shiraz. All right, Shiraz. Let me. I want to give Gary equal time. You know?
I just had to share what you asked.
Yes,
you know?
yes, that's quite okay. Gary, let me bring you back in here. And you know, Shiraz was talking about some of the impediments. You know, some of the problems that that farmers are facing. You know, the inactive. You know, predial larceny squad. And you know. I wanted to sort of, you know, ask you, Gary, you know, what would you like to see being done more to protect, you know, fishermen on the sea? We have had a long history of Venezuelan borders being crossed and Trinidad waters being, you know, and so many, you know, abductions and reports of fishermen being killed and missing. What else can we do, Gary, to protect our fisher folk?
Stephen, I know you're in your 40s and Shiraz is in his 50s. But
I'm
in my late 60s. And when I was a young man, I was afraid of Macandal Gaga and Geddes Granger and so many of the revolutionaries who were willing to lay their lives on the line and did to create change and to fight for justice. But unless, what I would like is that our young people, hopefully the energy that I'm putting out would reverberate and that we would get young revolutionaries willing to stand up to the system. Imagine that between the men and women and the people who work in the sector, in the agricultural sector, you are accounting for at least 15% of the national working population. And the fisheries sector with 50,000 is at least 8%. So you're talking about a quarter of the national working population is represented by two lonely activists spending their lives fighting without reward, without recognition. But you don't have a single independent senator, not one, ever, to go in there, except George Bovell Sr., and he was a billionaire farmer who got land from the beloved government to farm the bison in Mayaro, state lands. I wouldn't really even say that he was the type of farmer that we needed to promote, but he represented agriculture as a senator back in the 80s. But we don't have any representation. We have no say. We have no say. We are like the invisible orphans. It's a marketplace where we must compete against countries with administrations and land space and administrative capacities where they could produce food at a quarter of the cost of what we could produce. So we would allow the big companies with all the money in the world to trade in food at the expense of our brothers and sisters here in Trinidad who are cut up with 27 dissections. We're cut up into 27 pieces, so we're not unified. We all segregated and separated, and we don't trust each other. We don't stand with each other. So what I would like, what I would like is a single independent senator. I would vote for Shiraz to sit in Parliament, as he would vote for me, because we agree with each other. We suffer the same consequences of neglect and bastardization that is so common. Why? You don't want me to say?
Let's make a piggyback on Gary a minute, please. My brother, I know that, and hence the reason why in 2020, I decided to go up as an independent candidate against the two big bullies. And I tried that because what happened is I saw the farmers and them in the area being bulldozed by in 2011 and then being mistreated in 2015 to the present time would have stand up and make a difference. They didn't even vote for me. You know,
All right.
so
So you
the thing about it is
Shiraz,
that I wanted to be I wanted to be the independent voice in the parliament that will show people what really representation is about.
all
I
right,
spend
Shiraz,
my own money and my time to
were part-
try in 2020.
so you were part of the politics, and you
No, I
understand-
wasn't. I was still not a politician. What I try to do is to make a difference, to
Okay,
be a game
understood.
changer, to try something. But the thing is, I stood by what I have said for all the years gone, and I stood up in 2020.
All
Right?
right.
But the people didn't accept that, so I accept that also.
Understood. All right. We just want to remind our listeners and our viewers that this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. I'm speaking with Mr. Shiraz Khan, representing the farming community in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Mr. Gary Aboud of the Fishermen and Friends of the Sea organization. Gentlemen, we unfortunately we are almost out of time in our program. There are some other areas we wanted to touch on, but Gary, let me come back to you. As I said, there are so many issues, so many social issues, that we have to treat with, have to face up with, I suppose some of the blame would naturally have to fall upon the policymakers and those who are at the levels of society where they can influence the change. But certainly, Gary, when we look at communities and we look at where you sit, do you believe that that more can be done from the part or on the part of communities, because if you have communities coming together and raising their voices on specific issues, certainly you will have the kinds of changes that you would like to see. Are you sensing that we are that type of people, that we are ready for that kind of activism? You referenced the 1970s. I'm not sure if you probably made reference to what used to happen in decades past, Gary.
Well, I've been involved in fishery mismanagement and corruption since the 1980s. I want to miss the point that I'm making.
Go ahead.
10 years after the IMA were mandated by legislation to acquire equipment to fingerprint the culprits of oil spills. Some 400 oil spills that we've had reported in 4 years. And they have mandated by legislation to own equipment to fingerprint the culprits so they can be prosecuted. Last month, they admitted under Freedom of Information that they don't have any working equipment. So when you speak about hope for change, I am not saying that change should come at the end of a barrel. Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King did not fight a war to create change, but they stood up against the adversity and gave their lives. And we need citizens to come forward, because I would not recommend for anyone to follow my example of attempting to be a lifelong activist, so that at the end of my days, I have the testimony of failure before me. We need hard tactics. We need, I would even say, if you would say Martin Luther King was a mercenary, I would say he was an intellectual mercenary. That is the type of activism that we need going forward, because all this talking and begging.
Your views are respected, and as I said, let me just bring back just quickly in Shiraz. I know we almost, as I said, we almost towards the end of the program. Shiraz, a way forward quickly, and for us, as I said, you and I have been having this discussion for quite some time about the state of agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago and where we are going. In less than 60 seconds, as we close out the program, and Gary, I'd also come back to you to get some closing remarks. Shiraz, where should
60 seconds is a kind of wish-wash for me,
Yes,
but
one
of the important things is that if we cannot see it fit to think about how we can improve the sector, the agriculture sector, in terms of, I don't want no money from the government.
All right.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. What happened is that we need to understand that if we don't deal with the agriculture sector, what Gary is talking about, the vulnerable, it will be worse than what it is. Because here what's happening, at the end of the day, crime is because people don't have. And in some cases, because some people lazy. And in some cases, people just want to live a high life and treating others. You look at what has happened in the last 2-3 months with what they're doing to the farmers of this country and the poor people in this country. Crime has gone beyond our control, and we are suffering from that because some people, when they used to leave their home at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to their garden, wherever it is other located, they are scared to do that. Because if Gary said we could export shrimps, we could also export tilapia rather than importing tilapia from China. What we're doing is that we're not giving those tilapia farmers. We have a farmer, Kendra, cannot get help in order producing more for this country, Mr. Cummings.
All right, Shiraz, I think we've gone over your 60 seconds.
I told you that 60 seconds you gave me.
Yes, Gary, you're closing.
He could have my time. Let him go. He could have my time. Everything he's saying, I'm on the same page. Shiraz, go ahead because.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying here, if it is that we actually look at some things right now, Gary has made a point that the Syrians vex with him. Fine, no problem. But why it is that we are allowing people with foreign exchange to continue to import something that we could produce in this country? I made the point just recently. Imagine we importing parsley into this country when Paramin have an abundance of parsley. If it is that when the records show that we don't have enough, why can't we look to incentivize a farmer to continue to grow more rather than look to import? You understand? We have the ability to produce just as good, because if you look at what some of our farmers have done in this country, is beyond the understanding of people on the outside. We had farmers from England visit here, and they said that you are doing very good down here.
Oh, Shiraz, we have to leave it there at the moment.
Okay, thanks again to you and your station for facilitating me. I continue to share my passion because this is my love. And thank you for the time. And I know we will have future encounters in terms of where we go forward.
Indeed. Thank you, Sharon. And Gary, thank you for being on the program. And we, as I said, we have to continue the discussion. I think that we would need to invite you back very soon. Thank you both for being on the Citizens Community Forum.
Thank you, Stephen. I hope we didn't offend your audience. And for those that we did, we have no apologies.
Gary, thank you again. This is
my friend.
the Community Forum.
Gary, my brother, stay strong.
Cummings, of course, we every Wednesday we have a program, Citizens Community Forum, where we focus on so many different issues here affecting us in Trinidad and Tobago. And this evening is no different. I'm Stephen Cummings. As I said, this is the Citizens Community Forum. We'd like to thank Gary Aboud as well as Shiraz Khan for guesting with us at this time. So until our next program, we will see you next Wednesday. It was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984.